Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. Seana Coughlin is a kindergarten special ed teacher in Coney Island, New York, and her book, Skylar's Invisible Thread, is proof. No matter what happens in life, you can pick up and move on and make a difference in the process. Hey, Seana, let's start with your inspiration.
What inspired my book is, unfortunately, my son was killed.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so he never made it home, and that's what inspired my book.
What happened?
He was killed on a Sunday night. He was coming home from his dad's house and got into a car crash. He was 17.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, I know. The worst day ever.
Did writing this kind of help you deal with that?
It definitely does. Yeah. I did it, of course, to honor him. At first I was like, oh my God. And still, what can I do to honor my son, to, carry on his name, and just as his mom to show him that I love him and I'll never forget about him. But then the second thing that, came up almost just as quickly as honoring my son is helping people. I immediately just felt like, what can I do to help? I don't want anyone to be sad, to feel as bad as I feel, and I know they do. So what can I do to help? I, just always wanted to really help people. And so working with children, I taught for a long time in Massachusetts, and I've always taught special education. And I've always worked with an alternative population of children that seem to have a lot of distress in their lives. And part of that is death. So I've had a lot of, even before my son Skylar died, I've always had children asking me about death. And, it's usually their mom or their grandma or their dad. Where did they go? They died. My dad died, and where did he go? I miss him. All they know is that they died and they're gone. And they miss them so much. So I used what I learned after my son passed to write this story for children. Because I just really wanted to teach them what I learned, because I believe in it so much. And I really wanted to help them process death and make sense of it in a very real way that little children can understand.
So how do you lay out this book?
So Skylar basically walks through the world. So it's myself, my daughter Cassie, and Skylar. And the first half of the book, Skylar is alive and he's still with us. And so we just talk a little bit about our life, and that Skylar is the third person in our family, and the number 3 is an angelic number. I've learned a lot about numerology, and the number 3 is a really special number. So we just talk a little bit about our life first, and what a great kid Skylar was. He was just so talented. He could play the piano. He was always helping his friends. He was just such a good kid. He would help me around the house, bring in the groceries and different things, that maybe my daughter didn't want to do as much, but she definitely did help me. But Skylar was just such a good kid. So it starts like that, with the 3 of us living on Earth together, and the great things that Skylar does while he's alive. And then halfway through it switches. So Skylar is killed, but it doesn't say that in the book. It just switches. I transition into it by saying, and then tomorrow Skylar is in heaven. So that's the transition. And then the second half of the book is Cassie and I communicating with Skylar while he's in heaven. So it talks about Skylar sending us pictures in the clouds. He'll say, Mom, I'm sending you a picture of Batman. And then I look up and I see Batman in the clouds. And then on another page, my daughter and I are walking through the woods and we come upon a deer. And, we know that the deer is there giving us our little hello from heaven from Skylar. And that's pretty much how it goes, looking at the sunset and just getting faith in the beauty of a sunset that Skylar is still watching over us, as well as all of our angels. And the title of the story, Skylar's Invisible Thread, is, like you said, Skylar is my son. And the invisible thread is the relation to our connection to the heavenly realms while we live on earth.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That really is beautiful.
Thank you.
Do little kids ask what happened? How come he's here one day and he's in heaven the next?
No, they have never asked me that. No.
Interesting. So you have had the opportunity to read this to little kids.
I have. And they haven't asked that. And I've actually never even thought about that. But that's an amazing question that definitely some of them might ask.
Well, maybe not. I mean, if you're 5 years old, 6 years old, maybe not.
And you're exactly right. Maybe not. They just kind of like keep moving on.
Right.
They just go with the flow. They're just gathering the information that is presented to them, and then they don't even question it. So it probably could happen both ways.
Yeah. This book reminds me, there's a prayer about, I'll see you in the woods. I'll see you.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And I will see you in the things that you like to do. I'll see you in the water swimming. I'll see you on the bike riding. I'll see you in those things. I'll see you in nature.
Yes.
My mind immediately goes to, the parent groups that are out there helping parents deal with the loss of a child. And I know this is a book for children, but, would that be a comfort to them?
Yeah, and that's such a great idea. And I wish I could do more of that. That's what I would love to do more of. I bring it everywhere I go. So I go to like Compassionate Friends. I go to my every other week groups. So I bring it where I go. But I have never, like presented it to another group or anything like that. But I have given it to as many people as I can. I've given it to like my counselor who also works with children. I've given it to a couple other counselors that I know that they work with children.
Is there something else you might want to write about down the road?
Well, I mean, the next project that I actually thought of was I've learned a lot about heart math. It's just another really fascinating topic of our hearts are so much more than pumping blood through our body and keeping us alive. They have basically their own intelligence,
their own brain
system. Yes, they have their own brain.
Yes.
And our heart actually sends more messages to the human brain than the rest of our body.
I did see that. And like it really, like the first thing I thought about was the broken heart. When your heart literally is broken.
Yeah, exactly.
With sadness, with a loss, with a boyfriend, husband, when your heart, it really does break. It really does. It's like there's an emotion going on there in your heart.
I know. It does the same. It does the same thing in animals. I know people have actually died from a broken heart. Animals also. I recently read an article on a baby elephant that had died from a broken heart. I mean, you don't read about it a lot, but every once in a while you do, and you'll read. Just within the last couple of years, I read about a mother, that died just a couple days after her child, and they were saying that she died from a broken heart, and
Yeah.
also, and recently, there was the school shooting in Texas,
Yes.
and one of the police officers, his wife,
Yes.
yes, and they said, and then he died had a heart attack like a week
Yep.
later.
Right.
Yes, they said the same thing about him. They said it was his grief, his broken heart. He just, his heart couldn't take it.
Wow.
So I think that's fascinating. And I thought to myself, if I could put that into a children's story, for children to know how much your heart communicates with your brain, and how much our feelings really affect us.
And matter. That's why they matter so much.
Yes, all of that. Because I feel like it's another thing that children don't really know. Like, I feel like
Right.
most of us are still taught, your heart keeps you alive, don't smoke, eat healthy,
Right.
take care of all of that, take care of your heart. But not a lot of children or even people know the intelligence of your heart. So that was my next, but you know what? It is so expensive to publish a book that's what stopped me.
Ah,
I just don't have the finances, which is so
right.
unfortunate. But yes, but that would be the next one. If I,
Right.
make it big someday, that's what that's what's next in my little list of
Well, if it would be nice if you could just make back what you spent to get this book published. And
that would
then
yes.
and that's possible. That
That is
is possible. I'm
possible.
not going to say it's impossible. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I can tell you after 10 years of doing this, some people really do figure it out.
Good.
They figure out the right audience. They take the most unconventional paths and
Yep.
manage to at least make back what they invested. And then other people don't even care. They just are so happy that they were able to accomplish this. But I mean, that's nice if you can afford to do that. But so you don't know. Anything's possible, Seana.
Thank you so much. You are exactly right.
If you ever visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Museum in Holmdel, New Jersey, James McGinnis just might be your tour guide. It's the perfect job for this vet who served in South Vietnam from 1966 to 1967 as a senior scout observer in the Reconnaissance Delta Company, 3rd Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment, which he details in his book, Romeo 1-1. Now, it was someone who took your tour, right? Who you credit with helping you get this book published.
My name is Nora Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
In 2019, Nora came down with her family to take a tour. And then I heard from her about a couple of months later. She was going to Brookdale College. She had some courses where she was doing some papers on the Vietnam War. So she said, I wanted to reach out to you because you're the only one I know from that served Vietnam. And we become very friendly, the entire family. And I mentioned one time to Nora and her Aunt Nancy, I said, in Vietnam, I kept a diary. And I told them the story of how I put a diary together, which was given to me by a very close friend of me. She goes, did you ever think about putting it into a book? And I said, no, I've never thought about it. But she goes, well, Aunt Nancy is in the publishing business. They actually gave me the inspiration to do it. And we started this probably last November. And I made copies of the diaries. And Nora, she actually typed it out into a Google Doc file. And she retyped the entire stuff so it could be adjusted and everything.
That's great. Sometimes that's all we need is that little push from someone to say, you got to do this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it sure helps that you had written everything down. Now, you were in Vietnam for a year?
From July 66 to July 67. I was drafted in October 1965. And a very close friend of mine, Dennis Buttacavoli, when we were going to the draft board in Union City, New Jersey, where we were going to, Fort Dix, gave me the diary and inspired me to write this stuff down.
Oh, my gosh. The name of your book is Romeo 1-1.
Right. The reason I wanted it to be that name is because any veteran that served in Vietnam, if they're infantry like I was, when you were out in the field, in the bush, and you're doing patrols and all kinds of different things, you had to communicate with other units. And how we communicated, we used the PRC-25 backpack radio with a battery. And everybody had a call sign because you couldn't say, this is Charlie, this is John. And I was in Delta Company, and I was in reconnaissance platoon. So in the phonetic alphabet of the Army, A to Z, R is Romeo. So my call sign was Romeo 11. I wanted that title to be the title of the book. So Vietnam veterans, as soon as they saw that, they know it's a radio call sign. And that was my purpose of doing it that way.
Right. What stands out for you from that experience?
Well, when I was writing down the entries, it was almost like I was writing to Dennis, who his name to me was Denny, Denny. And the book itself, the first few pages, it does have a picture of the book along with to Denny. It was aimed at other soldiers, the way we used to talk, the way we used to communicate in Vietnam. So there are a lot of Vietnamese terms in the book that I use, because when you're in a foreign country like that, you start to talk with their language a little bit. You know, certain things in this country are something, but over there would be something like someone, we wanted to get somebody out of the way and tell them to get out of the way. The Vietnamese term would be Didi Mao, okay? So I put that in the book as far as, that's the language I would use. I wrote down exactly everything that I experienced during the tour of duty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There was a lot of bad, a lot of ugly, but there was some good. And it's really something special because I wrote down the names of the soldiers. I used the last names. I actually identified them by name and the situation that we went through as far as the book. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I've got 39 pictures in there that I took. There's a few of myself, but most I took of the pictures of the areas we were and the different things I'm talking about. I actually annotated 3 items at the last part of the book, 3 stories that are very interesting. We were doing a patrol in 3 Corps in Vietnam. We were at the Big Red One with the 1st Division supply base in Tay Ninh. And we were going on a patrol. And typically, if you had a patrol, if it was toward the middle of the day, the temperature could probably be 110, 120 degrees, okay? If you took a break from a patrol, just for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, you want to be in the shade, obviously, right? So we took a break one time, and the sergeant and me didn't get along very well, okay? And he actually sent me and another soldier into the middle of this field at the blazing sun, about the noon sun, right? And I'm thinking to myself, why did he do that? But anyway, I had orders, and I did what he said. So here we are sitting in the middle of the field, and there was a trail not too far from us, and the Vietnamese people were walking on this trail with the ox carts and stuff like this. And this elderly Vietnamese man, I call him Papa San, because that's what we did. He looked at us. He came over to us, looking at us in the middle of this field, and he actually had some stuff on his ox cart. He went ahead and built us a lean-to shade us from the sun, which was bamboo sticks that went into the ground, and he put a thatched roof on top to shade us from the sun. I thought that was so impressive, that the humanity that he showed to me, a soldier who he didn't even know. I said, I just thought this is so humane. So I wanted to give him something. We didn't speak the same language, but I had a folding knife I had purchased in Tay Ninh. So I gave him the folding knife, and he bowed to me, and then we went in our ways. And I always thought about this, one of my wonderful experiences of Vietnam. There's another story that's right after that. It's a letter I wrote home to Dennis, and it's an experience, probably one of my worst experiences of Vietnam. I'm asked sometime when I do tours, what is your best and worst day in Vietnam? Well, my best day was actually leaving on that aircraft from Tan Son Nhut Airport, okay? You know, when you first landed in country, you didn't think you were going to make it home. You thought something was going to come in your way, and it was not going to be good. In Vietnam, we had a lot of air mobile assaults. We jumped out of helicopters, you know, chasing and trying to find the enemy, which was very elusive, obviously, because they were an insurgent. They didn't wear uniforms, and they were farmers during the day and whatever else, and at night they were the killers. They went out to get you. But the way I put it to this, I said, Dennis, I want to tell you this experience. The most dangerous stuff we did in country was night ambush patrols. We went at night, prior to dark, trying to get to a spot where we would ambush the enemy. They moved at night, moving their equipment around, and that's when they moved. So we're outside the base camp in Tay Ninh. We had a 14-man patrol at night. We'd go in just before dark, and we'd set up around this trail to try to, if the enemy came by, we would ambush and kill them, okay? And we had 12 guys in the kill zone, which is 2-man positions. That's 12 soldiers, because during the night, you had to have one person awake at every position during the night. So we called it, you know, an hour on, an hour off, basically. And I was on rear security because you had to protect the rear in case somebody snuck up. I was with another fellow's name was Harold Coughlin. Now, I had been in country about 7 or 8 months at the time. I was pretty stable. I was pretty used to what was going on, you know, and I had my stuff together pretty well. Well, about 2 in the morning, we heard mortar tubes uh, being fired from behind us. So now I'm facing the base camp. The kill zone, which is the main belt of the ambush, is behind us, staying there in case the enemy comes by. And I knew, we all knew that that was the enemy mortars because it was coming from behind us. So the enemy was mortaring the camps with these mortars where they launched these rockets. Okay, now up to that time in country, I was pretty stable as far as keeping my stuff together. But we internally, we all have a command. We really don't. We can't control. It's called fight or flight. Well, what happened at that time, the flight internal command in my body tried to take over. And I started shaking, I started stuttering, and I actually lost complete control as far as lifting up my rifle. I was shaking like a leaf. And I will never forget that time. But internally, I said to myself, hey, troop, you got to get your act together because this thing's going to get terminal in a hurry. And it probably lasted about 23 seconds, and I regained my composure. But that's the only time it ever happened to me in country. Now,
Wow.
the sergeant, who as well knew that the camp was being hit by mortars by the enemy, he radioed the battalion headquarters, and he says he requested commission for us to get up from our position. We had 14 soldiers to go after and see if we can get these guys. Well, battalion said, who's your navigator tonight? A navigator would be a soldier that carries the Lanzati compass, mostly during the day, and it would be my job as the navigator to get us to any position. And I always was very good with that. I never made a mistake. So they said, who's your nav tonight? And he says, Mac is. Well, my nickname was Mac. And they said, if Mac says you're there, you're there. So battalion says, you stay where you are, you hug the ground. We're going to fire artillery over your head to try to get these guys. So consider this. We're in this position in the middle of the night in Vietnam. The artillery from our base camp is firing over our head. They were, artillery. And the mortars are going the other way. So we're kind of, I think the term stuck between a rock and a hard place pretty much indicates what that was. So now Comp and I rolled into the main body because we didn't worry about anybody behind us at that time. We knew the enemy was behind us on the other side. So we waited for them to come. And we knew that the Viet Cong would mortar twice before dawn. And as soon as the sun came up, they disappeared and they go back to disappearing where you couldn't find them. So we knew they'd come past our position sometime. And if they did, we'd have to open up and attack them. Well, they never came past our position. They were probably at about 1,200 meters. But they did go past our position without us seeing them. And they mortared once more just before dawn from the right side. Okay? So when dawn broke, they sent Alpha Company up to go with us to see if we can come to the position where they first mortared from. It was pretty flat ground, so you could really tell with how many pressure plates or stuff was on the ground. You could count. So we got to the position where they first mortared from with Alpha Company out with us, and it was determined they probably had 72 Viet Cong with automatic weapons and 6 mortar tubes. So the moral of the story is, if we got permission to go after these guys, I probably wouldn't be telling you this story. That was my almost worst night in
I
Vietnam.
bet you tell that story when you're taking people on tour, don't you?
I do on occasion, but it has to be. I don't like the younger children, I don't want to tell them that story, the younger children.
Excellent. So you are currently a tour guide at the New Jersey Vietnam Veterans Memorial Museum and the Learning Center in Holmdel, New Jersey, if anybody wants to find you. Jim McGinnis, great job. Is there a follow-up to this book?
I haven't really thought about it, but there's talk about it maybe.
Okay. All right.
See, I'm a tour guide, so I can talk forever,
Yeah. Does being a tour guide help? Like, are they selling books where you're a tour guide?
I'm going to do a book signing.
Okay.
What I have done is I have purchased 100 softcover books, and I'm going to donate them to the museum.
Nice.
So the book signing we're doing is already taken care of monetarily. So all the profits are going to go into the museum.
You're a good man, James.
That's what I want to do.
All right. T.A. Crosby is in Buffalo Bills country in upstate New York, where it snows till like June. We were just talking about that. Snow is a way of life up there. Gives her lots of time to write. And the oldest of her 6 children inspired her to write her book, Trinity. So what's the story?
Actually, this was over 10 years ago. My oldest son, he didn't want to go back to college in Daytona, and he was going for Homeland Security and such. And the thing is that I told him at Christmas break, listen, I've always wanted to write a book. So for every chapter, you have to stay. And I will be sending you my chapters. And then finally, I just started sending him the names of the chapters. And he graduated. It was his first year, and he ended up graduating. Now he's going to be a state trooper, New York State's trooper,
That's
starting
great.
in May. Yeah. My children are my force in life. They drive me.
Yep.
They really do.
So, what's your book about?
My book is about a young girl who's coming into her own and didn't realize that she has lived lifetime after lifetime of never finding what it felt like to love or of anything that was part of her, of a family sense. And on this lifetime, she embarks on her 18th birthday. And on that fateful night, she ran. And she ran from the misery and the agony and the violence that was happening to her. And she ran into two younger girls, who were teenagers as well. But she took them under her wing and they became a trinity through the travels. And little did she know that those two were already marked as well, but she was marked as the one. And she did not understand any of it. Everybody was having a life, living, loving. And the things that she started seeing were um, mystical, basically, like different realms. And she couldn't understand any of it. And there was one presence that followed her through all the lifetimes. And this time was his chance to take her. And he was not supposed to. He was supposed to protect her. So, ensuing on that, what happened was that it shift shifted back and forth through times and how the three men that were involved with the three young ladies that were the Trinity, they were the band of brothers. And they all became all very close. Obviously, you could tell that one became with one, the other one came with the other, and then Alex and Blade came together. But Alex and Blade did not come together towards maybe middle of the book or so, and she fought it because she didn't know what love was. She never felt love, and she never understood why the agony and the violence and was could love conquer all? Was there a possibility of giving yourself? And through the whole entire book, she really gives them all a bunch of hell when you think about it. um, but yeah, it's realms and
So, are they traveling through time? Are
they travel through time. There is a time shaper that's in there.
are they vampires?
There's vampires, yes. Well, part vampire, but more of an ultra being. If Blade became one with himself, he would be able to control all the universes. But he was never allowed to touch the one. She was marked from these other alter egos in these different realms and dimensions, and the horrors that she went through, and how he always showed up to protect her and find her. And she hated him, and she was unable to love because she was created that way. And in the end, love does triumph. She learns to love. But in the whole entire essence, you find out all her lifetimes and everything that she has been through and what she's had to go through just to get to this point, and that there is always the love of our existences because that's what we are. We're creatures of, happiness and love, and the hate and the anger and the violence that gets taken over when there's love, and people can succeed through that. And Alex found her way, and she's very strong, very
Is
strong.
is this based on anything? I mean, this is a pretty involved story.
You could say that. Basically, I'll give you a little rundown on me. I've written articles for papers dealing with survival of child abuse and things like that. So all those characters are basically part of me: the warrior, the fighter, the victim. So yeah,
So you've written articles about this, and
yeah.
what was the catalyst for you to finally sit down and write this book?
The catalyst was it's been in my mind for a really long time, and you're busy with six children, and finally my two girls, and I still had three up in the rear, but my two girls, teenagers, they saw what was happening in the marital dynamic. And I needed to show them that just because you see does not believe that there's no love. And we really went on a safari, my children and me, during it all. And I can't say safari in a good way, but I can tell you this, that Trinity is basically my two girls and me, obviously with a lot of my moxie behind them because they were still young, teenagers. In my eyes, still young. But yeah, it was just an amazing adventure. I just start writing. I go for a run and I come back and it was just there. All the dialogue, all things that needed to come about and how this one got to know this one. And it was just a page after page for me. And that's where my son, I made that challenge with him is because he knew for so many years I wanted to write and I never took the time. I took the time just because of life. And I never took the time to do and put them on paper, you know? Instead of speaking it, I wrote it down.
So are you going to keep writing?
Absolutely. I have honestly, I have 4 different starts of books halfway through on each one. That all relates to these characters. There's new characters. And I want to talk to my local country station, WYRK. I love them. I love country music. So I'm hoping that I can get in touch with someone there and see if they can, local author, hey, here she is. Boots and all.
All right. All right. Well, you hang in there, T.A. Crosby, and thanks for taking the time to talk to
Alice,
me.
thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Odessa, Texas, home of Friday Night Lights, is where we find Ray Ballard, who produces commercials and really likes scary stuff, which explains his book, All the Monsters Are Here, 13 Spooky Tales. Let me guess, Stephen King fan?
Very much so. Probably way too young to have read Stephen King, but that and the Twilight Zone inspired me to want to tell stories. I've always wanted to tell stories since I can remember. So,
wait, you're too young for Stephen King, but you remember Twilight Zone?
Absolutely.
Reruns.
From very, very, very early age in reruns. Yes, it was the one thing me and my stepdad could do together.
Aw. So you have 13 separate stories.
Yes.
Are they linked in any way, or do they all stand alone?
A couple are linked in a little way. If you read them, hopefully you catch on to it, but it's not obvious.
Okay.
So as you read the story, you may, it is connected, but most of them are standalone.
So why now? Why did you decide to go down this road? It's not easy.
Well, it's a combination of wanting to write a book my entire life, but never quite having the time because you know how life gets in the way, and it's really hard sometimes. You just sit down and just write when you have a job, when you have responsibilities. And what gave me the opportunity to finally sit down and do it was COVID, the outbreak, when everybody was sequestered. And instead of just sitting there not doing anything, I just decided I'm going to write a book.
I am going to do a whole show with nothing but writers who finally decided to do what they've always wanted to do because of COVID.
Yeah.
COVID inspired more writers than I can count.
Yeah.
Right?
I just wanted to make that time, use of that time, because what else were we doing? I mean, I noticed everybody turned to entertainment. Everybody turned to Netflix. Everybody turned to whatever they could watch on their television because that's all they could do. And I thought, wow, people just turn to entertainment when this kind of stuff happens. And that's why entertainment and writing and it's so important. People need that something
right
when there's nothing.
Right.
And I've always wanted to write, and it was like, what am I doing just sitting here? Write a book.
Yeah. So share one of your stories with me so we get an idea. Get an idea of the flavor of your book here.
Well, it's called All the Monsters Are Here. And each story has what I call a monster, whether it's a supernatural or a human. Because, and they're both capable of being good and they're both capable of being evil. And so, for instance, I have one story called Eden where, people are trying to escape from zombies who are trying to eat everything. And then I have another story where a zombie is the good guy and the humans are the bad guy. So it goes both ways. There's sympathy for the monster, and then sometimes monsters are just bad. But so can humans. So, yeah, there's a story called Night of the Living where a zombie is the good guy, and all he wants to do is see the woman that he once loved. And along the way, he's being hunted by humans. And so I think anybody can relate to that as far as having someone to love and then trying to get to them no matter what the cost. And then also having something in your way like humans that are trying to kill you.
Yeah, that'll do it every time, right?
Yeah, that's generally what the book is. It's both sides. Monsters are good and some are bad.
Do we learn lessons?
Only in that everybody, if you look at someone that could be horrifying to look at, but underneath they could be wonderful people. And I think that applies to anything. Monsters, human beings, we're both capable of good. We're both capable of bad. And it's just how you act, how people view you, and how you really are. And then those who are willing to look deep enough to see what's real.
So have you told everybody you work with that you wrote this book?
No, I'm not one of those people that walks around bragging. I don't really feel comfortable doing
That's not
that.
bragging. You want to sell this book or don't you?
I do. It's just I kind of let the book speak for itself. I put it on my social media. People that know me, oh my God, you wrote a book. That's great. But
All
I didn't
right.
go, hey guys, I wrote a book. And look on my Facebook page. I kind of want people to discover it that way. But I do realize, and I am marketing my book to the public with a company. I hired a company to help me, and we're going to do a lot of digital marketing to get it out to the world. But as far as people I know, I feel like it's weird. I don't want to force myself on them.
No, but I mean, people are impressed. Let me tell you, not many people can sit down and write a book. I'm impressed by every single person I talk to, whether they wrote a great book or a terrible book. The fact that you took the time to sit down and put your thoughts together, it is a difficult process. The editing process is alone.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You just want to, whoa, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, saying, hey, I'm going to have a book signing. Yes, I wrote a book. You would never do that.
Kind of put it on my social media, and if someone came to me, these are just people I know. Now, people I don't know, I'm very comfortable putting it out there. I wrote a book. Please buy it. Let me know what you think. That's marketing.
You got bookstores, right? Local bookstores?
Yeah, we have big market stores, Barnes and Noble, that kind of thing. But we also have very small bookstores, like we call it. One is called Yale Bookworm. They're a little bitty mom and pop bookstores now.
I bet they would love to hear some of your stories. Are you a good storyteller?
I would like to think I am. I've never actually read anything in front of a group of people, but I'm kind of looking forward to that. Actually, I've never done it, but I think I'm going to do that to these small bookstores.
Start small, yeah. You want to be comfortable, but then as people start reacting to what you're reading, and you look up and say, "Wow, I wrote something pretty good." Huh?
Yeah, start out small. Yeah, start out small, like 2 or 3 people, and then hopefully it gets bigger.
There you go. Yeah. All right, you let me know how you make out with that. You got to keep writing, Aaron.
That's my plan. That's what I've always wanted to do, but I never ever thought I could make a living at it. That's the dream. But yeah, that's the goal, is to be able to do this for a living.
Well, then I'll be talking to you again soon, okay?
All right.
Let's check in with Rebecca Alford D'Amato, author of There Is No Cheese. Hey, Rebecca, where are you?
I am in Clarksburg, West Virginia. West by God, Virginia.
West by God, Virginia. Okay. Why? Why is that?
Oh, it's just a saying. I mean, West Virginia is just a beautiful, beautiful state. So green and mountainous and beautiful lakes and people. It's just a great place. So we say West by God, Virginia.
All right. What do you do there?
I am a teacher, high school English.
Yeah. So what inspired There Is No Cheese? Is there no cheese in West Virginia?
There is no cheese is a metaphor for the idea that we're all like rats running around in a maze, desperately looking for that golden slice of cheese. And the joke is there actually is no cheese. We're just running around aimlessly looking for something that we're never going to find. Which I know that sounds at first hearing maybe kind of negative, like we're searching aimlessly for something we'll never find. But actually, the whole book is about the fact that what we're looking for outside is actually inside. What a crazy place to hide, but right inside of us. It couldn't be any closer to us than right inside of us. And we're searching everywhere in the outside world for meaning and purpose, when in fact it's all right inside of us.
Did something happen that compelled you to write this?
Yes, many things, but way back when I was I would say about, well, yeah, I was in kindergarten, so I was around 5 years old, and the word metacognition means the ability to think about what we're thinking about. And being human for me has never come easy, even as a 5-year-old. And I questioned everything, all of the guidelines, all the rules. And so I started kindergarten, which was at my church. It wasn't really a kindergarten like in your school system. And after the very first day, I came home and I told my mother that I was quitting kindergarten one day, and I'd had it. It was enough. The reason being, there was a little girl who I just met that day, and she stayed right beside me. And I kept saying she was a breather. You know, I came home and said, "Mama, she breathes on me. She stays right there. She wants to talk to me all the time, and she's breathing on me." And and I can't take it. You know, I can't take this. And I'm the fourth of 4 children, but there's a 3-year gap between me and my older sister. So I had spent a good bit of time as a little kid learning to play by myself. And there was something about, you know, her presence right upon me that I found, you know, just very disturbing. And so my mother said to me, "Becky, why don't you, instead of thinking of this little girl as like this bat that's around your head and batting its wings and gross and disturbing, why don't you think of her as a little fairy, like a little fairy princess with wings that's right there and loving you and wanting to be close to you. Why don't you try thinking about it that way?" And so I went back to kindergarten hesitantly, but with my mother's advice. And what do you know? I started thinking about this little girl who I could tell you her full name right now. I mean, I could see her just as clear as anything, as a fairy. And the next thing you know, we became best friends, and we were the queens of the sandbox at playtime together. And that story doesn't even appear in the book, but the point being that I recognized at a very young age, and this is what inspired the book, that the way that I thought about things created my reality. That the very thoughts that I was thinking created the reality that I would experience. So I was creating my reality all the while living it and reacting to it. And I became aware of that at a very young age. And it made my young years, as well as into my teens and 20s and 30s, I'm now almost 60, it was very unusual to live inside my own head and inside my own body. And the older that I've gotten, the more I recognize how the way I was perceiving the world was very unique compared to what I hear from other people about the way they perceived the world.
Okay, so lay out your book for me. What is in your book?
The book is a series of contemplations, questions, poems, flash fiction, illustrations from artists all over Harrison County, students of mine that contributed very unique and different artwork, as well as my children. And all together, it creates a journey which emulates the rhythm and the flow of life and the way that we, as soul, living in a human body, experience this strange combination of this ethereal, beautiful light that is ever expanding, trapped in a way, but also gifted to live in a human, fleshy, passionate human body that lusts for things and has ego. And that is a strange and wonderful combination. And that journey is not an arrow that shoots straight up.
So there's a lot of different things in your book. Can you give me an example of one thing in your book?
Would you like me to read a piece from my book?
Okay.
Before all the rules, I once loved God. I once loved me. I woke up today, finally, again to that feeling, deep sigh, fine, fine with me, my life, my choices, all of them, even the crazy and inappropriate. Guilt, we each carry so much of it for things said and left unsaid, done and undone. But the ego teases us to project our guilt outward onto others. Scapegoats, all of them. Theatrical pieces of the illusion, so we can blame them for our own lack of peace rather than looking inside where everything is, the all of it, heaven and hell. We feel its heaviness. It's just so much responsibility to shoulder. So we throw it away, unconsciously project it onto everybody else, anybody else. It's his fault, her fault, your fault, just as long as it's not my fault. No, no more. Not today. Today I own it, all of it, all my choices, the rude, the impulsive, the uninformed, the indignant, the wise, the wonderful. Just put myself out there. Not right, not wrong, simply responsible, guilty as charged. Love me anyway, or not. It's all just me creating, learning, and remembering new ways to love myself anyway. The moment is both a microcosm of the infiniverse and a macrocosm simultaneously, because each messianical moment contains the all in its timeless slice of time. Love myself or not. Today I choose non judgment. Today I choose to love me. And guess what? That means I love you too, every version of you, and me, and the kumquat, and the tree. Yes, I woke up feeling okay today. My blanket of forgiveness is big enough for me, big enough for all of us. Suffer no more. Imperfectly perfect. Champagne in a Dixie cup.
Nice.
Thank you.
Definitely paint a picture with that.
Well, when my book came out, I had a year of personal illness as well during 2020, the whole entire year, filled with surgeries and treatments and things because I had cancer. So now I'm getting back into promoting my book. I did some home parties and had some book signings, and I was beginning all of that process. And
Are you okay? You going to be okay?
I am better than okay. What
Good.
I tell people all the time is that, I wouldn't put anybody through. I had stage 3B rectal cancer, and I had to have multiple surgeries, radiation, chemo, all of it. And I would not want to put anybody through the year that I had. But what I would like to do, what I would want to do is to give everybody what I learned from that year, because I learned so much and I grew so much, and I never felt so loved in my whole life.
That's awesome.
I
Good
know.
for you, Rebecca.
Well, thank
I know,
you.
turning it around. All right. A mailman in Illinois, Jay Camp, offers a reinterpretation of one of the oldest books in the world in his book, Taking It on Faith.
I'm a bit of a reader, and one day I decided to read the Bible as a book from Genesis all the way to Revelations, one shot. And I had some questions, and then I started thinking, well, I should write them down. And then once I had the questions, it was like, well, what would the answers be? So I started to write a little bit of a story, and then I said, well, how would this story begin? So I had to go back, and I started it with Gabriel, messenger of the Lord, coming up to this regular old person, not somebody who's PhD in religious theology and stuff like that. Just a regular old person who has a bit of a problem with organized religion. And it sort of goes from there. Gabriel tells him he wants to, that the Lord wants to talk to him. And of course, Ian Knight is the character's name, and he does not believe who he's talking to, as anybody else wouldn't either at this juncture. They have about 3 conversations, and then God replaces Gabriel, and he doesn't believe he's talking to God. So it discusses some of the stuff in the Bible, but mainly it took a turn because I started adding into other things like what's happening now in today's society, gangs and the abortion thing and everything else. And it just went from there. There's a few things that people will probably find to be a bit off-putting, but it's more because of Ian's language, because he's sort of a guy of the streets, and he grew up, but every now and then, he uses more colorful languages. God wants to talk to Ian, about a lot of things. Later in the story, you find out that one of the reasons is the way Ian prays. Ian calls them one-sided conversations because he'll ask many questions of God, but, you never get an answer. Not one that is verbal or, in a dream. It's just the answer is always no because it doesn't happen. And Ian has had a rough life, so a lot of that comes down to it. It adds into the story. He went to a parochial school, and he has a bit of a problem with organized religion because Ian's always been a pain in the butt or inquisitive type, and you're not supposed to ask questions in religion class. It's like, no, you're always told, then you don't believe. Well, Ian believes that you have to ask questions, otherwise you'll follow anybody. So he's always asking questions, and he would get in trouble in school for asking the questions and find his butt sitting in the hallway at school because he was being disrespectful or whatever. And there's many questions, and God tells him when he finally speaks to God that there are questions. One question he cannot answer, many questions he will not answer, but anything else, it's open game. It's up to Ian to figure it out, which questions to ask and how to ask them. The last chapter is actually the first chapter of the next book, just to keep people's mind going. Ian's he considers himself a sinner. He's a flawed person, and he knows it, and brings in a lot of things that have happened in his life, and it tries to correlate that into what he's discussing with God, but he won't even call the guy God. He'll call Gabriel, of course, because that's just another name, but, thou shalt not have any gods before me. He won't call this guy God. He just thinks he's a religious fanatic or some kind of nut, but he always gets into conversations, religious conversations. Ian doesn't shy away from political discussions or religious conversations, So it intrigues him, and it drives Ian's wife nuts. So, a lot of that comes into play.
We're watching him, I guess, test his faith. Does he have faith?
Oh, he has a lot of faith in God. He questions the human aspect of organized religion because humans can corrupt, basically make things out to be in their favor or what they perceive to be the truth.
Are you talking about your book? Do people know you wrote it?
Oh, yeah, there's people that I've sold. I know I've sold books. I don't know how many yet. My wife is managing me, so we put it online on Facebook. I've got some friends. We've started a new Facebook page for the book itself, and I'll answer questions. And it basically tells people, though, that a lot of these questions are real. The answers I made up in my own imagination, I guess you would, for want of a better word. I try to show people that that we have all the same emotions as God. God has a sense of humor, and if you read the Bible, you discover that. But it's buried a little bit, so you have to see it. And we have a sense of humor. So in the book, God has a sense of humor. Now, Ian will tick off God, because, once again, he's always trying to discredit this guy's, Todd's, revelation that he's God. So it sort of gets on God's nerves from time to time, but then it comes back around to humor and stuff like that. And the Ten Commandments are dealt with and all kinds of stuff. The Angel Wars is the one I think is one of my better scenarios. And the creationism, of course, I bring that into play. So I
guess you kind of have to.
Yeah,
right?
You do have to. But you can I also try to tie in prehistoric man and dinosaurs and stuff, because dinosaurs are actually mentioned in the Bible twice that I know of. And but they don't know specifics. They just use the word dinosaur. So it's like, So I try to tie all that into it to show where man has come and where man has come from, actually. So, it's meant to make people think a little bit, because I look back at some of the things like the Branch Davidians and stuff like that, and here's people that quite honestly believed that he was the second coming, and he promoted that. And I look back and think, well, the dude wore glasses. Did anybody bother to question that Jesus didn't wear glasses? It's like sometimes you look at things and you got to say people sometimes can be gullible. And, you can't. And I know Ian questions things that he shouldn't be questioning, but that's always been his MO. It's like, okay, if he doesn't understand it, he's going to ask. He doesn't have a filter, so he's going to put it out there and hope to God that he gets an answer,
all right,
so to speak.
Well, thank you so much, Jay. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Not a problem.
All right, we hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime you want on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.